Jomon, Japan. Jomon, Japan preserves one of the oldest continuous pottery traditions in the world. Ceramic vessels appear more than 14,000 years ago, long before agriculture took hold in most regions. The pottery is intricate. Cord-marked patterns, clay coils, and vessel shaping reveal technical mastery across generations. Communities were semi-sedentary. Seasonal camps suggest mobility, yet settlements show repeated occupation for centuries at the same locations. Ritual artifacts accompany everyday tools. Lacquered objects, figurines, and ceremonial implements indicate symbolic behavior integrated into daily life. Mainstream explanations focus on environmental productivity. Rich coastal and forest resources could support partial sedentism, reducing the need for large-scale farming. Yet the complexity of the pottery and ritual items implies more than opportunistic settlement. Specialized skills appear, maintained, and transmitted over millennia. Alternative interpretations suggest early craft specialization occurred independently of agriculture. Communities could sustain skilled artisans while remaining largely foragers. The origin of pottery remains contested. Some argue for independent invention in Japan, others suggest cultural diffusion from mainland Asia. Both explanations rely on limited early samples. Early coastal sites are particularly vulnerable to erosion. Rising sea levels since the late Pleistocene have submerged or destroyed many settlements. This creates a preservation gap. Chronology is patchy, with older phases sparsely sampled. The oldest extant examples may not reflect the first innovations. Excavated hearths, pit dwellings, and midden deposits provide evidence of repeated occupation. Layers demonstrate long-term cultural continuity despite environmental fluctuations. Tool assemblages show a balance between mobility and permanence. Fishing implements, hunting gear, and plant processing tools coexisted with storage and repair activities. The sophistication of symbolic expression is notable. Figurines and decorative pottery motifs recur across distant sites, suggesting shared cultural frameworks over large regions. Pottery analysis reveals consistency in clay selection, firing techniques, and vessel form. Knowledge transmission implies social networks capable of sustaining skilled practice over centuries. Population estimates remain uncertain. Semi-sedentary groups appear small, yet they maintained intricate craft, architectural, and ritual systems. The relationship between scale and complexity challenges standard models. Settlement patterns show repeated spatial organization. Standardized features coexist with localized variations. Pits, hearths, and middens follow predictable layouts. Gaps in the record obscure the earliest technological steps. Pre-ceramic innovation stages are largely invisible, compressed beneath later occupation layers or submerged by rising seas. Coastal erosion further complicates interpretation. Shoreline settlements from early phases are often underwater or heavily disturbed, leaving fragmentary evidence. Despite these limitations, the Jomon sequence demonstrates that technological and symbolic sophistication can develop independently of agriculture. Skills, social coordination, and material culture emerge in contexts previously considered marginal. The durability of traditions over thousands of years indicates stability and continuity. Communities adapted to environmental pressures while maintaining complex technical knowledge. Ceramic development parallels other early craft innovations, but the Jomon case stands out for its early date and uninterrupted trajectory. It challenges assumptions about the link between farming and technological specialization. Cultural continuity extends to burial practices, dietary patterns, and ritual behaviors. The integration of these practices indicates a social framework capable of sustaining knowledge across generations. The open question remains, how did small, semi-sedentary groups achieve such continuity and complexity without agriculture as a stabilizing force? The earliest phases remain undersampled, and the underlying mechanisms are unclear. Jomon, Japan compresses the expected timeline for craft specialization. The evidence implies that skill, knowledge transfer, and ritual integration existed far earlier than conventional models predict. Norte Chico. The Norte Chico civilization constructed monumental pyramids more than 5,000 years ago. These structures predate ceramics and show no evidence of warfare. Excavations reveal large platforms and sunken plazas, arranged with careful symmetry. Scale and coordination imply complex organization despite the absence of urban markers found elsewhere. The population relied on coastal and riverine resources. Rich fisheries and agricultural terraces may have supported sustained sedentism and labor mobilization. Standard interpretations suggest a resource surplus enabled construction. Communities could allocate time to monumental work without relying on ceramics for storage or trade. Alternative explanations propose lost precursor settlements. Earlier phases may have existed but are obscured by erosion, sediment deposition, or limited excavation. The architectural style is consistent across multiple sites. Central plazas, stepped platforms, and flanking mounds repeat in form, suggesting shared planning principles. Ceramics and other portable artifacts are rare. Stone and fiber technologies dominate, reflecting local raw material availability and a different developmental trajectory. Labor estimates indicate coordinated teams working over extended periods. The mechanisms of workforce organization remain uncertain in the absence of clear social hierarchy markers. Settlement patterns are dispersed. Smaller sites cluster near larger ceremonial centers, forming networks that suggest regional planning and interaction. The absence of defensive structures or weapons contrasts with contemporary civilizations. Monumental construction was achieved without militarized coercion. Agricultural terraces and irrigation channels demonstrate technical sophistication. They indicate knowledge transfer and sustained maintenance across multiple seasons. The earliest pre-ceramic phases are thin and widely dispersed. Stratigraphic evidence is fragmentary, leaving gaps in the developmental sequence. Carbon-dated remains suggest continuous occupation, but the oldest structures may predate the layers currently excavated. Complete chronology is therefore unresolved. Plaza alignments show intentional orientation, likely tied to solar or seasonal markers. These alignments imply observation, planning, and collective execution. Community rituals are inferred from offerings and spatial organization. Centralized ceremonial activity may have reinforced social cohesion, compensating for the lack of material hierarchy. Trade networks are implied by non-local materials, such as spondylus shells. These connections could facilitate knowledge exchange and support monumental projects. The distribution of sites along river valleys demonstrates strategic settlement planning. Proximity to water and arable land optimized resource use for both daily subsistence and ceremonial activity. The development of monumental architecture without ceramics or weaponry challenges, scale, coordination, and planning appear independent of conventional markers. How did dispersed pre-ceramic communities achieve such large-scale, sustained construction projects? Current evidence provides only partial answers. Further excavation of thin, early layers could reveal the origins of architectural innovation. Until then, the sequence of labor organization and technical knowledge remains open.
Napta Playa. Napta Playa contains one of the earliest known stone circles aligned with celestial events. Its arrangement corresponds closely to solstice positions, predating Stonehenge by several millennia. The site includes ceremonial structures and evidence of a cattle cult. Ritual deposits suggest repeated gatherings and socially coordinated activity. Mainstream explanations link the alignment to pastoral calendars. Seasonal observation would have guided herd movements and agricultural decisions as the Sahara dried. The precision of the stones raises questions. Alignments appear intentional rather than coincidental, implying a developed understanding of solar patterns. Alternative models propose knowledge exchange across early Holocene North Africa. Communities may have shared techniques and astronomical observations across long distances. Correlation is difficult to distinguish from deliberate design. Some features could reflect natural stone selection, while others demonstrate clear planning. Archaeologists document multiple concentric circles and isolated monoliths. Each element may have functioned as a marker for ritual or practical purposes. Settlement evidence near the stone circles shows semi-permanent habitation. Houses and hearths indicate repeated seasonal or annual occupation. Charcoal and faunal remains provide radiocarbon markers for activity between roughly 7,000 and 6,000 BCE. The chronological framework is robust but incomplete. Erosion and shifting dunes have altered the original layout. Many stones are missing or displaced, complicating precise reconstruction. The construction sequence remains debated. Early placements may have been modified or added in later phases, making the temporal ordering unclear. Material analysis shows careful selection of stone types. Larger blocks are consistent in dimension and orientation, suggesting purposeful placement. Patterns of wear and soil stratigraphy confirm repeated ceremonial use rather than incidental arrangement. Sites demonstrate long-term community engagement. The combination of ritual, astronomy, and animal management is unusual for the period. It suggests complex social cognition among mobile pastoral groups. Some scholars argue for practical functions, marking seasonal changes critical for survival. Others emphasize symbolic significance and social cohesion. The spatial arrangement demonstrates foresight. Central stones, radial alignments, and peripheral markers form a network that encodes both movement and observation. Nearby hydrological features indicate the selection of the site was influenced by resource availability. Proximity to water and grazing land would have supported semi-sedentary activity. Patterns hint at coordinated labor. Aligning stones with solar events requires observation across multiple years and agreement among participants. The site's broader context connects with other ceremonial locales in the Nile Valley and Sahel. Knowledge transmission may have been regional, though evidence is fragmentary. Artifacts and food remains indicate large gatherings. Recurrent occupations suggest planning, organization, and social investment at scales larger than individual households. Without complete preservation, interpretations rely on partial evidence and reconstruction. Future survey and excavation could reveal additional stones or buried features.
Indus Valley Civilization. The Indus Valley presents urban sophistication far earlier than conventional models suggest. Cities display water management systems, standardized weights, and grid layouts long before comparable societies in the region. Excavations at Harappa, Mohenjo-Daro, and surrounding sites reveal carefully aligned streets, drainage networks, and uniform building modules. Planning appears intentional, not incremental. Some evidence hints at earlier precursors. Buried layers beneath major cities contain rudimentary structures and early material culture, suggesting development over centuries before urban peaks. Mainstream interpretations see a gradual evolution from small farming villages. Incremental adoption of craft, architecture, and settlement density supposedly led to full urbanization by 2600 BCE. Alternative models propose an older substrate culture. Early settlements may have been lost to siltation or buried under later constructions, leaving few visible traces for conventional excavation. Radiocarbon dates from peripheral sites complicate the story. Some markers suggest occupation well before the recognized urban period, though secure stratigraphy is rare. The distribution of early dates challenges a simple linear narrative. Networks may have developed over millennia without leaving continuous, easily identifiable urban sequences. Water management illustrates the anomaly. Large reservoirs, wells, and channels require coordination and engineering knowledge, yet no earlier prototypes have been clearly documented. Standardized weights and measures appear suddenly across multiple sites. Uniformity implies communication across large distances, not isolated local innovation. Sealed pre-Harappan cores are largely missing. Excavation in the lower Indus plain is hindered by heavy alluvial deposition, leaving the earliest phases deeply buried. Urban grids present another puzzle. Streets intersect at right angles over extensive areas, suggesting pre-planned layouts rather than organic growth. Material culture shows continuity in pottery, beadwork, and tool production, yet the foundations of that continuity are invisible in many locations. Early sequences remain elusive. The absence of early monumental architecture outside the main cities adds to the interpretive challenge. It is unclear whether smaller precursors existed or were erased by later sedimentation. Hydraulic infrastructure indicates sustained collective effort. Constructing and maintaining canals requires both knowledge transfer and organized labor across generations. Population density estimates are difficult. The discrepancy remains unresolved. Cities could have supported tens of thousands, yet the archaeological footprint of preceding populations is minimal. Comparisons with contemporary sites in Mesopotamia highlight the anomaly. The Indus Valley displays urban characteristics in parallel, not necessarily dependent on external influence, yet precursors are absent. Environmental conditions complicate evidence. Annual flooding and sediment deposition obscure early occupation layers, compressing visible timelines. Sealed stratigraphic cores would clarify the sequence. Without them, the scale, origin, and development pace of urban planning remain partially speculative. Artifacts suggest technological continuity. Kiln-fired bricks, standardized weights, and craft tools show expertise maintained across generations despite gaps in the archaeological record. The juxtaposition of sophistication and missing early phases underscores a recurring theme. Complex social structures may predate visible urban markers. Evidence is strong, yet incomplete. How did the Indus Valley achieve widespread coordination, planning, and technical mastery while leaving scant traces of formative stages? Current data compresses millennia of potential development into a narrow, visible timeline. Only further excavation, deep coring, and targeted dating can expand our understanding. Göbekli Tepe. The first stones at Göbekli Tepe overturn the expected order of early human development. Monumental architecture appears before permanent farming, and the timeline loses its usual staircase. Archaeologists identified carved pillars organized in rings, each shaped with controlled symmetry and repeated iconography. The uniformity suggests planned execution rather than improvised construction. The site demands labor coordination beyond small mobile bands, yet no clear evidence of settled villages surrounds the hill during its earliest phase. Researchers propose that hunter-gatherer aggregation events might explain the scale. Seasonal gatherings could have supplied people and resources without permanent habitation. This interpretation raises a friction point. The precision in pillar shaping implies trained skill. Short seasonal visits make long-term mastery harder to maintain.
Another view argues for under-recognized semi-sedentism in the region. Groups may have lived in flexible patterns that left lighter archaeological traces. If that's correct, the social baseline for the late Pleistocene becomes more complex than previously modeled. Mobility and construction capacity would no longer sit at opposite ends of the spectrum. Dating results anchor the site at around 9,600 BCE, and multiple laboratories have converged on these figures. The numbers hold, but the context around them remains thin. Fill layers complicate interpretation. Many enclosures were deliberately buried, creating sealed contexts that preserve materials but obscure the construction sequence. Some layers appear older than expected, but their relation to the standing architecture is uncertain. Disturbance during burial might have blended sediments from different activity phases. Tool marks on the limestone pillars offer another data trail. Their patterns could reveal the rhythm of carving, but direct dating of those surfaces is still missing. Without that data, researchers rely on associated materials such as charcoal fragments. These offer reliable ranges but cannot tie precision work to a specific construction year. The site's organization hints at a standardized template. Each ring uses paired central pillars flanked by smaller stones arranged in a consistent layout. This repetition suggests the builders were following established plans rather than experimenting. That continuity makes the absence of precursor sites more striking. Nearby surveys have searched for earlier architectural attempts. So far, nothing predating Göbekli Tepe shows similar engineering ambition. Animal reliefs carved into the pillars display a shared visual grammar. Regardless of enclosure, the motifs follow aligned proportions and consistent carving depth. Such standardization implies knowledge transmission, possibly through artisans dedicated to this work. No direct evidence of workshops has been identified. Geological sampling around the site shows heavy quarrying activity. The stone extraction zone matches the pillar profiles, indicating deliberate selection of blocks with favorable grain. Transport methods remain uncertain. The distance is manageable, but the size of the stones requires coordinated teams. No mechanical aids have been recovered. The site's builders managed large-scale tasks without leaving clear signs of hierarchical organization. The social structure driving the project is still undefined. Some researchers propose ritual incentives as a central motivator. The interpretation remains plausible, but lacks direct proof linking belief systems to construction logistics. A competing explanation suggests that shared labor increased community resilience during climate instability at the end of the last ice age. This model outlines practical motivations rather than symbolic ones. Still, neither model fully accounts for the site's longevity. Construction extended across multiple layers, each reflecting renewed planning rather than simple maintenance. The earliest layer remains the most puzzling. It contains the largest pillars, the deepest foundations, and the tightest engineering tolerances. Excavation has not yet reached the bottom of all enclosures. Sealed floors or deeper platforms may exist under the unexcavated mounds. If earlier construction phases lie below, the established timeline could shift again. Current age estimates anchor only the layers that have been sampled. Ground-penetrating surveys show anomalies beneath the known rings. Their geometry is ambiguous, and excavation has been cautious to avoid disturbance. The exact identity of the builders remains unresolved. Genetic and cultural links to surrounding groups are still being refined through ongoing analysis. Göbekli Tepe stands at a junction where the traditional model of slow civilizational buildup becomes harder to defend. The evidence compresses the gap between mobile groups and engineered monuments. The site suggests that the cognitive and organizational capacities for large projects existed earlier than expected. How these capacities formed remains the open bracket. Whether deeper layers hold older construction or only natural sediment will determine the next revision of the timeline. The answer is still underground.
Pre-dynastic Egypt. The Sphinx enclosure in Giza shows weathering patterns inconsistent with conventional dating. Erosion on the walls suggests exposure to significant rainfall far earlier than the dynastic period. Excavations around the plateau reveal tool marks on limestone blocks. The techniques differ from later Old Kingdom methods, implying an earlier tradition of working large stone. Orientation of key monuments aligns with proto-astronomical markers. Positions appear intentionally aligned with solstices or stellar risings. Mainstream explanations attribute weathering to differential erosion over millennia. They argue later dynastic construction and sedimentary deposition created apparent anomalies. Alternative interpretations propose older construction phases beneath or before recognized dynastic layers. Early builders may have shaped foundations that were later integrated into monumental complexes. Sediment layers remain disputed. Stratigraphic continuity is difficult to establish due to centuries of human activity, alluvial deposits, and urban interference. Material analysis confirms that some erosion patterns predate known Nile sedimentation cycles.
The timing implies environmental conditions different from the late Holocene climate typically associated with dynastic Egypt. Tool marks suggest a methodical approach to stoneworking. Their depth, angle, and repetition indicate practiced techniques rather than ad hoc quarrying. Proto-astronomical orientations are consistent across multiple enclosures and structures. They hint at observational knowledge embedded in architectural planning. No secure early habitation layers have been uncovered directly beneath the monuments. Dating relies on indirect stratigraphy and weathering proxies, leaving uncertainty. Comparisons with other pre-dynastic sites reveal sparse evidence of monumental effort. The scale at Giza contrasts sharply with smaller contemporaneous settlements along the Nile. Differential erosion hypotheses remain debated. Some researchers argue that rainfall, wind, and groundwater could explain observed patterns without invoking earlier construction. Yet the alignment of stones with celestial events challenges purely geological explanations. The combination of weathering and orientation implies intentional design by knowledgeable builders. Artifacts from nearby excavations show continuity in tool types and ceramic forms. They indicate cultural transmission, but do not conclusively identify who constructed the Sphinx enclosure. Geological coring around the plateau reveals ancient alluvial layers. Their depth and composition support complex depositional histories, complicating dating of the underlying structures. Repeated alignments suggest sustained attention to celestial cycles across generations. Evidence of proto-astronomy may reflect practical or ritual observation. The unresolved edge is clear. No sealed, unambiguous pre-dynastic construction layer has been fully dated. Claims of 9,000+ years remain open hypotheses. Additional targeted coring, high-resolution stratigraphy, and independent dating of tool marks could clarify timelines. Current data allows multiple plausible interpretations. The foundational builders compress the expected emergence of monumentality along the Nile. Skills in planning, quarrying, and orientation appear before well-documented dynastic society. Understanding this early activity could shift models of state formation and labor organization in pre-dynastic Egypt. Without secure contexts, the evidence remains incomplete. Pre-dynastic Egypt demonstrates how environmental, technological, and astronomical data converge on a mystery. Each datum challenges assumptions without providing a definitive timeline.